I woke to the beep of a monitor and the burn of oxygen and realized I was fighting to stay alive. The ceiling swam, the IV tugged, and a nurse, not my mother, held my hand. My name is Emily Carter. I am 34, and tonight my parents chose my sister's dog over me. The nurses called when I arrived and warned I might not make it through the night. My parents did not come. Claire had a dog obedience class, and they had promised to drive her. I live in Charleston, South Carolina, in a small apartment by the river with my 10-year-old son, Jack. In the morning, I am a news producer who writes scripts before dawn and chases stories until dinner. At night, I check homework, pack lunches, and set out inhalers and pills that keep my body calm. I have an autoimmune disorder that flares with stress and a severe allergy to animal dander. Most weeks, I manage it with lists and vigilance. Most weeks, I pretend the cost is not there. Tonight, the cost is written across my skin. Heat prickles along my arms. Each breath feels like air forced through a keyhole. Voices rise and fall beyond the curtain. Someone asks whether my family is on the way. I say they are busy. It is easier than explaining truth, easier than admitting I have been training for loneliness since childhood. It did not start here. It started in a split-level house where magnolia leaves glossed the gutters. I was the child who packed her lunch, set her alarm, and brought home blue ribbons and perfect report cards. Claire was 3 years younger and wanted an audience. When she drew a crooked sun, our parents taped it to the refrigerator like a museum piece. The week I won a state journalism award, they missed the ceremony to sit front row at Claire's talent show. I told myself it made sense. I carried that pattern into adulthood because patterns endure when unnamed. I married too young, had Jack, and left a marriage that could not hold. My parents praised my independence in the same breath they used to explain why they could not help. Claire needed something, a class fee, a deposit. Later, a purebred dog with a price tag bigger than my car's down payment. They remodeled a corner into a dog suite and told me to take another pill if I wanted to visit. I wish I had set boundaries, but that is not the story. I kept showing up, only now report cards belong to my son. Last month, Jack won a robotics prize, and my parents clapped while asking if the dog could attend. Now I lie under fluorescent light, counting breaths, and somewhere a gold bowl waits for a dog named Scout. Their choice has drawn a hard line through my life. What I decide after tonight will change every rule I have lived by for good. I wish I could say that night in the hospital was the first time my parents' priorities had been so starkly revealed, but the truth is, it had been happening for years. Claire had a way of turning every setback into a crisis my parents rushed to solve. When she flunked out of community college, they consoled her with a weekend in Miami. When she quit her third job in a year, they covered her rent for 6 months. Meanwhile, I was juggling a full-time job, raising Jack alone, and paying off the last of the legal fees from my divorce. The help I got from my parents came in the form of a used toaster one Christmas and a hang in there, kiddo, when I hinted at needing support. Then came the dog. Claire saw an ad for a golden retriever puppy from a champion bloodline. $4,000. My father didn't blink. He and my mother drove 2 hours to pick the puppy up, bought it a custom leather collar, and paid a contractor to convert their sunroom into a dog suite, complete with a climate control system. I found out about it on social media, Claire posting selfies with captions about Scout's luxury pad. I had to read the caption twice before the sting sank in. They knew I was severely allergic. I had spent years making sure Jack didn't visit houses with pets. Now the place where I'd grown up, the only house Jack had known as his grandparents' home, was off limits unless I wanted to gamble with my health. When I confronted my mother, she gave a practiced sigh. "You can take extra medication, Emily. Claire needs Scout for emotional support. You know how fragile she's been lately." Fragile. That was the word they'd used my entire life. It excused everything. For a while I stayed away. Holidays became short visits in public places, birthdays reduced to phone calls. Jack missed his grandparents, and part of me hated denying him that bond. So when my parents called one Thursday evening and invited us for dinner, I hesitated. "We'll make it special," my mother promised. "Just family. I'll cook your favorite, chicken pot pie, and your father will pick up that caramel cake you love from Simmons Bakery. I agreed. I wanted to believe maybe they'd noticed the distance. I wanted to believe we could have one night without Scout's white fur coating every surface. That Saturday, Jack and I spent the morning baking his favorite brownies to bring along. I wore a new blouse I'd splurged on and tucked my rescue inhaler in my purse. Before leaving, I took an extra dose of my allergy meds, just in case. As we drove across town, Jack chattered about showing Grandpa the robot car he'd built. I gripped the steering wheel and told myself to expect nothing, to focus on giving my son a nice evening. But deep down, I felt the same flutter I'd felt as a girl bringing home a perfect report card, hoping maybe this time, I'd be enough. The moment we pulled into my parents' driveway, my stomach tightened. Through the front window, I caught a flash of white fur bounding across the living room. Scout was here. I forced a smile for Jack as we walked to the door. My mother opened it, warm smile in place, apron dusted with flour. Come in, dinner's almost ready," she said, stepping aside. The dog's nails clicked against the hardwood as he trotted up, tail wagging. "Mom, is Scout here for the night?" I asked, already feeling the faint itch at the back of my throat. "Of course," she said, as if the answer was obvious. "This is his home too. Claire's staying the weekend." I wanted to turn around right then, but Jack was already halfway to the kitchen with my dad, proudly holding his robot car. I swallowed hard and stepped inside, trying to keep my breathing shallow. Claire was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone, Scout's head in her lap. "Hey, sis," she said without looking up. "Isn't he huge now? His trainer says he's a prodigy." She pressed her face into his fur, while my chest tightened another notch. At the table, the conversation was all about Scout, his obedience ribbons, the organic salmon kibble he preferred, the custom raincoat my parents had ordered from a boutique. Every time Jack tried to talk about his robotics project, the subject swung back to the dog. I watched his excitement fade, his fork tracing patterns in his mashed potatoes. Halfway through the meal, my eyes began to water, my sinuses clogging until my voice sounded muffled in my own ears. "Excuse me," I murmured, slipping to the bathroom. In the mirror, angry red hives bloomed across my neck and jawline. I took another pill, used my inhaler, and stared at myself. Just get through dessert. Keep the peace. When I returned, Jack was laughing at something my dad said, and for a fleeting moment, I thought maybe I could ride it out. But Scout chose that moment to leap up onto Claire's lap, sending a cloud of fur drifting into the air between us. My throat constricted in response. "You look pale," Claire said, glancing at me for the first time all evening. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I lied, pushing cake around my plate. By the time coffee was poured, my skin felt like it was on fire. My mother waved a dismissive hand. "You've always been a little dramatic about your allergies, Emily. Finish your dessert, you'll be fine." I smiled tightly, but inside, something shifted. This wasn't just about Scout. It never had been. And in 3 days, that truth would nearly kill me. 3 days later, I woke with the unsettling sensation that my skin was burning from the inside out. My arms were blotched with hives, my lips felt puffy, and each breath rattled like I was dragging air through wet cloth. Jack was still asleep, his hair sticking up in every direction, his school backpack slumped against the wall. I tried to shake off the dizziness long enough to get him ready, but halfway to the kitchen, my knees buckled. I caught the counter just before hitting the floor. I grabbed my phone and called my doctor's office. The nurse's voice sharpened as soon as she heard my symptoms. "Emily, you need to go to the emergency room immediately. This could be biphasic anaphylaxis. Do not wait." I hung up and dialed my parents. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. Finally, I called Claire. "What's up?" she said, the sound of barking in the background. "I'm having a severe allergic reaction," I told her, each word a struggle. "I need Mom and Dad to know I'm going to the ER. "Oh, they're with me. We're at a photo shoot for Scout. I'll text them when I can. He's being such a goofball right now. Hold on, Scout, not the camera." "Claire," I said, my voice breaking. This is serious. Please tell them now. Okay, okay. Feel better, she replied, distracted, before hanging up. I stared at the phone, my chest tightening. My neighbor Rachel's door was just across the hall. I knocked weakly until she answered, still in her work scrubs. Emily, you look awful. What happened? I need a ride to the ER, I managed. She grabbed her keys without another word. At the hospital, the triage nurse's eyes widened. We need a room now, she called, and suddenly I was surrounded. IVs going in, oxygen mask over my face, voices asking about my medical history. The doctor's words floated over me. Severe anaphylaxis, airway compromise, epinephrine now. A nurse bent down beside me. We've called your family, she said gently. They know you're here. I didn't know until later that when the doctor told my parents she might not make it through the night, my father's answer was, we can't leave Claire stranded with her dog. By then, I was too far under. My world narrowed to the hiss of oxygen and the fierce pounding of my heart. And in that dim space between waking and unconsciousness, a thought lodged itself deep. If I survived, things could never go back to the way they were. When I opened my eyes again, the first thing I noticed was the sterile white ceiling tiles and the faint beeping of a heart monitor. My throat was raw, my chest sore, and an IV line tugged at my arm. I turned my head, half expecting, half hoping, to see my mother in the chair beside the bed. Instead, a nurse with kind eyes and a name badge that read Mara was adjusting the monitors. Welcome back, she said softly. You gave us a scare. My parents? My voice cracked, more from the answer I feared than from the dryness in my throat. Her smile faded slightly. They haven't been in. Would you like me to call them again? I closed my eyes for a long moment. No. Don't. It wasn't just disappointment I felt. It was clarity, cold, sharp, and unshakable. I had nearly died, and my parents had chosen Claire's dog over me. The last thread of hope that they might one day treat me as more than an afterthought snapped clean. Over the next 2 days, it was Rachel, my coworkers from the news station, and my elderly neighbor, Mr. Harris, who showed up. They brought flowers, coffee, snacks for Jack, and sat with me through the long hours when breathing was still an effort. Mr. Harris even picked Jack up from school and made sure his homework was done, telling me, "Family looks out for each other, Emily, blood or not." The contrast was blinding. These people, none of them bound to me by obligation, had shown up without hesitation. My parents hadn't even called to check if I was still alive. I thought back to other moments. The time I was hospitalized with pneumonia in my 20s, and my parents sent soup by courier instead of visiting. The car accident when I was pregnant with Jack, when they told me Claire was too upset to come to the hospital, so they stayed with her. Mara came in that afternoon with a warm smile and a small clipboard. Your vitals are improving, Emily. You'll probably be discharged in a few days if all goes well. Good, I said, my voice steady now. I need to write something before I leave. She tilted her head. Something important? Very. I asked for paper and a pen, and when she returned, I placed the clipboard across my lap. I didn't know exactly how it would begin, but I knew what it would be. A letter to my parents. Not to convince them to love me more, not to beg for change, but to tell the truth. About everything. And once it was written, I'd make sure it was the first thing they saw when they finally decided to show up. It took me 3 days in that hospital bed to finish the letter. I wrote in the quiet hours between nurse check-ins and breathing treatments when the hallways were hushed and the only sound was the steady hiss of oxygen. Every word felt like a stone lifted from my chest. I began with the truth of that night, how the doctors told them I might not survive, and they still chose not to come. Then I traced the long, jagged history of smaller choices that had cut just as deep. I described the years of being invisible, of having my achievements reduced to polite nods, while Claire's smallest accomplishments became family milestones. I wrote about the day they bought Scout, knowing it would make their home unsafe for me. The countless birthdays and school events of Jack's they'd skipped because Claire needed them for something trivial. The last page was the hardest. It was my decision. I told them I could no longer be part of a family dynamic that put me last. Beneath my sister, beneath her dog, beneath any whim they deemed more important than my health or my son. I asked them not to contact me until they were ready to acknowledge the harm they'd done and commit to change. I told them I didn't expect that day to come, but I was leaving the door cracked open for my own peace, not theirs. When I sealed the envelope, I wrote their names on the front in my most deliberate handwriting. There was a finality to it, as if the act of pressing the flap close also sealed away years of self-doubt. On the morning of my discharge, Mara came in with my paperwork. "Your parents called the nurses' station," she said. "They're coming by this afternoon." "What time?" I asked. 3:00. I nodded. "I'll be gone before then." Mara raised an eyebrow. "I need a favor," I continued. "When they arrive, can you put this on my bed? Tell them I left it for them." I handed her the envelope. Her fingers closed around it, and understanding flickered in her eyes. "Of course." By 2:30, Rachel had picked me up. We stopped at a coffee shop across from the hospital, where I sat near the window, my coat collar turned up. At exactly 3:12 p.m., my parents walked through the sliding glass doors, dressed neatly as if arriving for a Sunday lunch. I didn't wait to see their faces when they read the letter. That wasn't the point. The point was that, for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one waiting for them. And as I sipped my coffee, I realized that whatever happened next, whatever they thought, whatever they said, would no longer decide my worth. 2 days passed before I heard from them. The first was my mother's voice on voicemail, tight and clipped. "Emily, this is your mother. We read your letter. I think you're being very dramatic about all this. Your father and I have always done our best for both you and Claire. Call us when you're feeling more rational." Then she hung up. Her words didn't sting the way they once would have. If anything, they confirmed exactly what I'd written. They still couldn't see past their version of events. The next day, my father sent an email. It was longer, more measured, but carried the same refusal to truly acknowledge the pattern. "Your letter forced us to think about some uncomfortable things. I admit we should have come to the hospital. I'm sorry for that. But I think you're being unfair in painting our whole relationship as neglect. We've always been proud of your accomplishments, even if we didn't always show it. We hope you'll reconsider this distance." I read it twice, then forwarded it to Rachel with a note that said, "Nothing's changed." My reply to him was short. "Thank you for acknowledging you should have come to the hospital. That matters. But this isn't about one night. It's about years of being placed last. I need time and space to heal. Please respect that." I didn't expect a response, and none came. 3 days later, my phone lit up with Claire's name. "Mom and Dad won't tell me exactly what was in your letter," she said, without preamble. "But they've been weird, fighting a lot. Mom cries at random." "What did you say to them?" "The truth," I said simply. "About the hospital, about our whole lives, about how I've always been last." There was a pause. "They told me you were just having an allergic reaction and would be fine. I didn't know it was that bad." "Would you have done anything differently if you had?" I asked. "I don't know," she admitted. "I guess I've never thought about it. Everything's always been about what I want. I didn't realize." Her voice trailed off. "That's how they raised you," I said. "But it nearly killed me." Her voice was quiet. "Are you saying you don't want to be my sister anymore?" "No. I'm saying I need to be my own person first. I've spent my life trying to earn their love, and it's left me empty. I can't live like that anymore." She didn't argue. She just said, "I didn't know you felt that way," before hanging up. It wasn't resolution, but it was the first crack in the wall between us. And I knew exactly how I'd respond if my parents tried to force their way back in before I was ready. 6 months have passed since the day I left that letter on the empty hospital bed. Jack and I now live in a sunny second-floor apartment in a quiet coastal town about 50 miles from Charleston. The air smells like salt water and jasmine, and at night I can hear the waves if I crack the window. My transfer to a smaller branch of the news station went through smoothly. The pace is calmer, and my coworkers treat me with a respect I once thought was reserved for other people. I keep contact with my parents to a bare minimum. Once a month, they call. If I'm in the right headspace, I answer. The conversations are short, civil, and end without the ache that used to hollow me out. I've stopped hoping for them to be different, and in that release, I've found peace. Claire has changed more than I ever expected. 2 months after my hospital stay, she moved out of our parents' house and into her own apartment. Scout now lives with a family who has a yard and children who adore him. I realized I never really wanted a dog, she told me over coffee last month. I just wanted Mom and Dad to notice me. There was no defensiveness in her voice, only honesty. We meet once a month now, and our talks feel real. We don't skirt around the past. We acknowledge it. Some wounds are too deep to close quickly, but I can see her trying. I can see us trying. Jack has blossomed here. He's joined a local robotics club, and last weekend he and his teammates took first place in a regional competition. My parents didn't come, but Rachel and Mr. Harris did. Sitting in the front row, clapping so hard their hands turned red. Jack beamed at them the way I once wished I could beam at my parents. I still have bad days. Therapy with Mara's recommended counselor taught me healing isn't a straight climb. Sometimes the old ache for approval flares up, but now I recognize it for what it is. A shadow, not a truth. What I know now is this. Family is not defined by blood or last names. It is defined by presence. By who shows up when the road buckles under your feet, who answers at 3 a.m., who holds your hand when your breath is thin. That night in the hospital, my parents chose my sister's dog over my life. I can't change that, but I can choose, every day, to fill my life with people who would never make that choice. If there's one thing I want anyone hearing my story to remember, it's this. Your worth was never meant to be proven. It simply is. And the ones who truly love you will see it without you having to beg.